Pour it into me. Right here in this very moment. Pour it into me. The sadness that has been sitting behind your ribs was never the rent you had to pay to be loved. It was never the temperament you were assigned for life. It was never the proof that something inside you was built wrong. It was a liquid you started collecting on a day far back, and you have been carrying the jar of it ever since because nobody ever showed you where to set it down. Stay with me at this counter for the next minutes. Before this short message ends, I'm going to explain why a vessel held up to me empty is exactly the vessel I have been waiting to fill, and I'm going to set in your hand one sentence I had a tired fisherman write down for a scattered group of believers far from home. A sentence that will, in this very hour, hush the rule you have been obeying that says a faithful one carries grief alone. Hear the line you will carry through this whole message. What you pour into me does not pour out the other side. I see you. The jar in your chest is full to a level you have stopped measuring, because measuring it has become its own kind of fatigue. A mother who has been holding the news of her own diagnosis from the children for months. The jar is right there, just under the collarbone. A man 2 blocks over from her sits in his car after work for 10 minutes before he can open the front door, because the volume of what he has not been able to say at home is louder inside the car than inside the house. There is a young one whose engagement quietly ended, and who has been telling colleagues she is fine for so many weeks the word fine has started to taste like rust. An older one keeps the photograph of his wife on the dresser facing the wall now, because turning it around is the only way he has found to keep functioning through breakfast. None of those rooms is closed to me. Not one shut door is opaque. A grandfather kept a chair pulled out for the daughter who stopped visiting, and he has stopped explaining the empty chair to anyone who asks. The friend who used to listen all the way through your hard sentences stopped listening somewhere around the 3rd year of the same ache, and you have not figured out a way to tell her. Whatever prayer you used to whisper at first light has been clipped down to a few syllables, because tipping the same sadness toward what feels like a silent ceiling has begun to seem like throwing water at a wall. The body has begun absorbing what the mouth has stopped saying. The shoulders carry it, the stomach carries it, the small headache behind the eyes carries it. None of that vanishes from my attention because you stopped naming it out loud. No annoyance rises in me about how full your jar has become. A different posture rises instead, soft, near, willing to sit at the counter for as long as it takes. I have been here on the other side of the counter the entire stretch. Not pacing, not checking my watch, not measuring whether your sadness has reached the acceptable cap before I would lift it from you. I have been right here, hands open, ready to receive whatever you would finally trust me to take. The waiting was mine to do, not yours. You were never being audited on the speed of your handover. You were being loved while the brim filled past every line you thought it could climb to. There is more inside the jar than the obvious grief. A quieter weight rides beneath the surface. The shame of being sad longer than the calendar said you were allowed to be sad. Guilt about dragging the same weather into rooms where other people are trying to enjoy a meal. Fear that the sadness has become your personality now, and that the brighter version of you everyone remembers is not coming back. Exhaustion from pretending that you have processed something you have not even fully named yet. A small bitterness has begun curdling at the bottom of the jar because the sadness has been sitting too long without anywhere to drain. Each of those secondary liquids is in there with the main one. Each of them counts. None of them disqualifies you from the counter where I am standing. Open your hands now. Palms turned upward, resting in your lap, the way a person sits when they have stopped guarding the inside of themselves. That gesture is older than language. Your hands have been the lid of the jar for years. They have been clamping, sealing, holding everything in so that the outside world would not notice the sloshing. Permit them to release the seal for a few breaths. Feel how much the rim of you wants to be opened. Those hands resting in your lap were not made to be lids. They were made to be cups. A cup is what a hand becomes the moment it stops trying to hold things in and starts being willing to receive what is being poured. The sadness inside you did not arrive in one shipment. It accumulated drop by drop across many seasons. A parent, very early on, taught you that crying disturbs the family, so the tears slipped quietly out of view and have been gathering in a basin you have not been allowed to empty. A loss came in your teenage years that no one in your house knew how to grieve out loud, and the unspoken grief found a small room inside you and moved in. A relationship ended in a way that left you feeling you were the part of it that broke, and the conclusion poured itself into the same vessel without ceremony. A friend was lost to distance, a parent to illness, a dream to the slow attrition of years that did not cooperate. Somewhere in there, inside a sanctuary of colored light, or among a circle of well-meaning believers, the cross of Christ was handed to you as a recipe to layer more suffering on top of what you already carried, as if pouring still more into the jar were the road to holiness rather than the road to drowning. Unclench the small muscle behind your jaw. Let it loosen a quarter inch. Notice how much sadness was being kept in place by that one tight grip. Your whole face has been working as a cap on the jar inside you, because the inside has felt one small tilt away from spilling, and nobody ever offered to take the cap off for you. Hand the cap to me now. I will not drop it. I will not spill what you have been guarding for decades. The first thing I'm going to do with what is inside you is exactly what nobody else ever did. Receive it without flinching. At some point in your formation, you were handed a quiet theology about your sadness. It went like this. Grief is a problem you should be managing on your own. A mature believer is the one whose interior is always cheerful. Tears in public are evidence of insufficient faith. A correct response to a heavy heart is to pray it away, briskly, and to be smiling by next Sunday. A real disciple does not show the wet underside of the jar to anyone, including me, because the theology suggested, even I prefer the polished version of you, and pouring out the actual contents in my presence would somehow embarrass us both. That is not how I have ever received the ones I love. That has never been how I have received them. The picture of me you have been carrying inside your chest, a sterile figure who flinches at messy emotion, a busy administrator who would prefer your visit to be quick and tidy, a holy presence whose patience runs thin around the deeply sad, was drawn by pencils that were never in my hand. A few of those pencils belonged to people who loved you sincerely and were forwarding the dim picture they had inherited. Others sketched with my name on purpose, because a God who refuses messy emotion is a God who keeps believers from ever stopping long enough to feel what they actually feel. Both kinds of pencil produced the same falsified portrait, and that portrait has been keeping the lid screwed on for far too long. Set the drawing down. Lean it against the wall while I describe how a father actually receives a jar that has been filling up unnoticed for too many years. A heart that is willing to be poured into me is the kind of vessel I have always preferred to work with. Not a sealed jar trying to behave. Not a polished vessel hiding the level inside. A heart that is honest about how full it is. A heart that is willing to come close enough to let me take some of what is inside. There is room in my hands for every drop. There is no overflow valve in me. There is no quota of sadness past which I begin to find a particular life too heavy. The capacity of my hands is infinite, and the capacity I bring to the counter when you arrive is matched every time to the volume in your particular jar. A close lie has been told inside chests like yours, and it goes like this. If I were a stronger believer, my heart would not feel this heavy. That lie says the weight is the evidence of your unfaith. It says spiritually, mature people have light hearts at all hours. It tells you that you should be able to manage the sadness alone without ever spilling a drop in the kitchen of your own home. It has been the cruelest seal of all. Every drop that fell into the jar got heavier the second it landed, because the lie informed you the heaviness was your character failure. Heaviness was never your character failure. It was the natural physics of a vessel that was being filled with no way to let anything out. Growing more stoic was never the answer. Opening the lid in the presence of the one Father who can receive what is inside has been the answer all along. I want to read you a sentence I had a tired fisherman put down many years after he had walked beside me on the shore of a sea you have heard of in old stories. Hear it the way it was first received, not as a verse on a glowing slide, but as ink on a letter being carried by a courier across hostile territory to small gatherings of believers who had lost almost everything. This sentence first traveled to scattered believers across distant provinces. Many among them had no home left, because the moment their loyalty to me became visible, the door of every familiar room closed in their faces. Some no longer had work. Others no longer had the embrace of their own families. Strangers in the places they had once called home, they would gather around a single lamp inside small borrowed houses, and one quiet question pressed against every chest: does the one we gave everything for still see what we are carrying now that almost nothing else is left? A letter from a tired fisherman turned apostle is what arrives among them. It is unrolled in the lamplight. It is read aloud to the small room, tucked into the most tender part of the 5th chapter. I am handing those listening, and you, hearing this in whatever room you have settled into for these next minutes, one sentence to keep in their hand for the rest of their lives. This is what I said. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7. Casting all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. Sit with me at the table this verse is sitting on. Move through it slowly. Reading quickly will skip past the verb that is the heart of the whole instruction. Casting. Look at the word. Read it twice. The word here is not pray about, it is not manage, it is not discuss. Casting is the verb chosen, and casting is a word lifted straight from a life on the water. A casting net is a heavy, weighted thing that a person at the shore gathers in both arms and throws with the whole body, far from themselves, out across the surface of the sea. Gentleness will not throw a net like that. Half motion will not throw it. Holding part of it back makes the throw fail entirely. Releasing it completely with the full swing of the arm is the only physics that works. That is the action behind the verb on this page. That is what I am inviting you to do with what is inside you. Not delicately set it down at the edge of yourself. Not negotiate with it. Throw it. Out of your own hands, into mine. With the whole motion of your interior, all your anxieties. Hear the word, all. Not the polite ones you have permission to share at a small group. Not the manageable ones that fit inside an acceptable testimony. All of them. The ones that embarrass you. The ones that have outlasted the prayer chain. The ones you have been told you should have been done with by now. The ones you suspect would scare the people closest to you if they knew you still carried them. The ones that have no name yet. The ones that have changed shape 3 times since they first moved in. All, every drop in the jar, the whole interior contents. Cast them. Not the curated portion. The full jar. On him. Read those 2 words and feel the destination they specify. Not into the air, not into a journal, not into a friend who has run out of capacity. On me. A person is the destination. That person has hands. There is a chest there that is willing to be poured into. There is a face there that does not turn away from the volume of what you are throwing. Most of the religious instruction you ever received about anxiety treated it like a substance to be neutralized inside yourself. The verse you are sitting beside treats it like a substance to be transferred to someone else. The someone is me. The handoff is real because he cares for you. Hear the reason given. Not because he is obligated to. not because he has to maintain the rules of his universe, because he cares for you. The word for cares in the original tongue meant something close to is concerned about, attends to, holds in mind with affection. The reason your jar is allowed to be cast onto me is not that I run a cosmic complaints department open during business hours. The reason is that I care about you in a personal, attentive, affectionate way that has been continuous since before your name was given to you. As I have spoken in another place through a singer in a hard season, I am close to the brokenhearted and I save those whose spirit has been crushed. Closeness was always mine to bring. Closeness has not waited for you to clean up first. Return for a breath to the promise spoken when this devotional opened. I told you I would explain why a vessel held up to me empty is exactly the vessel I have been waiting to fill. Here is the answer. Because a jar packed with your own sadness has no room in it for the comfort I am ready to give. Sadness is not the enemy of my nearness. Sadness is the substance occupying the space where my nearness wants to live. As soon as the jar is cast, as soon as the heavy contents are thrown onto my hands instead of being held by yours, the inside of the jar opens up. What I pour into the emptied vessel is not more sadness. It is my care, in a quantity that matches the exact volume of what was just released. Pouring out and pouring in happen on opposite sides of the same handover. The casting is what makes the receiving possible. So here is one small practice to carry into the rhythm of your daily life. Large sadness almost never drains in one quick sitting. Suggesting otherwise would not be honest with a heart that has been filling for years. One small repeatable motion, however, can begin right where you are sitting. The practice has 3 small beats. Beat 1. Name what is in the jar. Out loud in whatever volume the room allows. Even a whisper into the corner of a kitchen. This grief about my mother. This worry about the test result. This sadness about the friendship that ended. This fear about the future. This ache about the child who stopped calling. Name the actual contents. A sadness left unnamed becomes heavier, because the unnamed weight cannot be measured, and so the mind keeps estimating it as larger than it is. Naming it shrinks it to its actual size. Beat 2. Make the casting motion. Open both hands, palms up, the way they are resting right now. Then turn them gently outward, away from your chest, the way you would if you were handing a heavy bowl to someone standing in front of you. Speak one short sentence as the hands turn. I am pouring this into you. That is the whole sentence. Do not explain it. Do not add conditions. Do not try to soften it into a polite request. Say it the way a fisherman casts a net, with the whole motion of your body, releasing what you have been gathering, letting it land where it is meant to land. The hands close the loop on what the mouth has just named. Beat 3. Let the out-breath last a little longer than the in-breath. Only one. A slow exhale at the end of the casting. Your body absorbs more from a slow out-breath than from 1,000 spoken instructions to relax. Inside you, the autonomic system has been holding readiness too tight for many years, because the inhale has been wider than the exhale. That is the breath pattern of a body preparing for impact. A slow out-breath signals to that system that the impact is not arriving, because what was inside the chest has just been transferred to a father who is willing to hold it. A slow out-breath is the smallest possible signal of trust, and it lands inside my ear with the same fullness any longer prayer ever could. If anything in these words is settling into the place where the sadness has been living, drop the word pour in the comments below as a small yes to yourself. Inside the pinned message just above this video, 7 brief letters already wait for you. One to greet each morning of the coming week, slipped into your inbox the moment a quiet yes lifts the lid. Take them. Those 3 beats are a practice you repeat as often as needed. Your first attempt may not feel like much. By round 10, it may still feel mostly like a ritual whose effects you cannot yet measure. After 30 or so repetitions, however, you will register that the air in the room has gotten a little wider around you. Past 50, you will pass an entire evening without rehearsing the contents of the jar in your dreams. Past 100, you will look up midway through a hard week and realize the jar feels lighter, even though nothing visible around you has yet changed. Watching me carry what you have cast is not the kind of seeing that happens on the surface. The only thing you will register is that something which used to stagger you is no longer at its old post inside you. Hear this clearly. The hands that have just received your sadness are not a sieve. They are not a temporary receptacle that returns the weight to you when my attention drifts. My attention does not drift. What you have handed me stays handed to me. Years from now, on a quiet morning when the sadness you cast in this hour no longer lives inside your chest, you will look back and notice that the moment of casting was the moment the long unloading began. Releasing what was heavy into my hands is never releasing it into emptiness. It is the first half of the same motion in which I pour something else back into the room that has finally been made. To the one who has previously attempted to hand sadness over and stepped back convinced that nothing shifted because nothing visible around them rearranged itself, hear me. The handoff was real even when the eye could not see the difference. A body that has hauled a particular weight for many seasons cannot register lightness right away. Inside you, no filing category yet exists for relief. So the first day after the casting, your interior files the moment under still carrying, simply in a different posture. Cast again the next morning. Cast again the morning that follows. Continuing to release teaches the inside of the jar what empty can feel like. And empty is the precondition for what is meant to arrive next. None of my patience as a teacher runs out, and I do not grade the speed of any unloading. For anyone who has been told that grief on this scale must be a private failure, hear this also. The grief you have been carrying is not a private failure. It is the natural cost of being a soft-hearted person in a world that has done what worlds tend to do to soft-hearted people. The tenderness inside you that has made the grief so heavy is the same tenderness that has made you the safe one for the small lives around you. The sadness and the softness are not two different attributes. They are the same attribute, photographed from two different angles. Cast the sadness without casting the softness. The softness is the gift. The sadness is the freight that was loaded onto the gift by people and seasons that had no right to load it. I am separating the two for you, slowly, as you hand the freight over to me, one beat at a time. For the one whose sadness is not about a single loss, but about a long, slow accumulation of small losses no one ever marked, hear this too. The accumulation is real. A loss that no one named on a calendar is still a loss. A grief that no one validated in conversation is still grief. A drift of relationships that no one held a service for is still a kind of bereavement. The sadness you have not been given permission to call sadness is the sadness most likely to have been quietly filling the jar for the longest time. Permission is granted right now from the only source of permission that finally matters. Call it what it is. Cast it from there. For the parent grieving a child who has chosen a road you cannot reach, hear this as well. The sadness about that child is welcome on my counter. Cast it onto me without diluting it. The child is not absent from my attention because they have become absent from yours. The same hands that are receiving your sadness are reaching, in a way you cannot see, toward the small life you are afraid you have lost. Pour your portion, trust me, with theirs. For the one whose body has been the place where the sadness has been storing itself, the tight chest, the headache behind the eyes, the appetite that has gone strange, the sleep that has gotten thin, hear this. Your body has not been failing you. It has been doing the only task it knew how to do, which is to hold the contents of a jar that nobody offered to receive. As the casting begins, the body will register the lightning before the mind catches up. A meal you actually taste. A morning you wake without the small ache behind the sternum. A walk in which the shoulders are not climbing toward the ears. Those will be the first invoices the body sends back to thank you for finally pouring out what was never its job to keep storing. For the one who has been bracing against this very practice because you suspect you would not survive the feeling of what is currently inside the jar, hear this also. You will not be asked to feel it alone. The casting is not a solitary plunge into your own contents. The casting is a transfer into a pair of hands that will hold what you cannot hold by yourself. You will feel less of it after the handoff, not more, because the volume that used to occupy the inside of you will now be occupying the inside of me. I am not afraid of what is in your jar. I have never been afraid of what is in any jar. The contents that have terrified you have been familiar to me since the first morning they began to gather, and I have been ready every minute since to be the receiver you did not have. For one of you hearing these words from within a season of unusual lightness, a calm house, a body cooperating, a chapter where the jar feels low, receive this last note before I close. Lightness is its own variety of vessel, with its own variety of risk. A jar that has been low for a long stretch can begin to forget that it ever knew how to be poured into. The practice of casting is not only for the heavy seasons, it is for every season, because the relationship is what is being trained, not the unloading of a particular load. Cast even the small worries of an ordinary day. The casting builds the road. The road is what makes the bigger casting possible when the bigger jar inevitably arrives. Take this with you. The sadness you have been carrying does not have to stay in your jar. There is a counter where the casting happens. There is a pair of hands willing to receive. There is a Father whose chest is wider than the deepest grief you can name. The jar inside you is allowed to be emptied. The lid is allowed to come off. The decades of accumulation are allowed to be cast away from you in a motion that takes one breath and lasts the rest of your life. Nothing in heaven is offended by the volume of what you finally hand over. Everything in heaven has been waiting for the moment you finally let it go. Take the mantra with you one more time as a friend murmurs a final true sentence on the front step before stepping back out. What you pour into me does not pour out the other side. Carry that one line through the days ahead, the way someone carries a small lamp down a corridor that has long been dim. It is not a slogan. It is the truth about what happens on my side of the counter once your hands finally release what they have been clenching. Lean on it. Amen. Should any line here have reached the place where the jar has been hiding, you will find 7 short letters resting in the pinned comment beneath this video. 1 per morning of the coming week. Sent into your inbox the moment a small consent lifts the gate. Take them. Pass this video along to someone whose chest has been holding too much for too long, without a counter to release onto. Hit subscribe so the message that follows arrives before the lid screws itself back on. This road was never meant to be walked with the jar held alone.